Welcome to Pasa, HSIs, a podcast dedicated to everything Hispanic serving institutions. I'm your host, Dr. Gina Ann Garcia, bringing you the news on what's happening in HSIs. Join us as we explore the history and evolution of HSIs, culturally relevant and liberatory practices, current and emerging research with HSIs, and the policies that shape servingness.
Saludos, HSI familia, and welcome back to ¿Qué pasa? HSIs. On today's episode, we are joined by the Using Our Voices to Transform Hispanic Serving Institutions research team at Sac State. The Using Our Voices project aims to explore Latinx student perceptions of servingness in HSIs and how it can be improved. The co-researchers include 2 faculty and 14 students at California State University, Sacramento, who use a mixed method, participatory action research approach to engage students, grounding them as knowledge producers whose lived experience is essential to interrogating how university structures, programs, and policies support their success. Today, we are talking to faculty leads, Dr. Amber Gonzalez, a tenured professor in the Child and Adolescent Development Program at Sac State, and Dr. Ferreira van Leer, an assistant professor in human development and family sciences at the University of Connecticut. They are joined, and we are excited to welcome 2 student co-researchers, Samantha Secundido, current student at Sac State, and Jacky Villalobos, Sac State alum. Jacky is a first-generation college student whose parents are from Michoacan, Mexico, and she is the youngest of 8 children. Sam is a San Fernando Valley native and is the youngest of 3 siblings and daughter to Mexican-born parents from Veracruz. We are happy to welcome this team to the podcast today. Hello, Using Our Voices team. Thank you for joining us on ¿Qué pasa? HSIs, where we talk about all things HSIs. But first, we're going to learn a little bit more about the 4 of you. So let's go ahead and start off with your servingness journey. And I'm going to call Amber to the microphone to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Gina, for having us. We're super big fans of you and your work and this podcast. I think we've listened to a couple as a team. So I'm Amber Gonzalez, and thinking about my servingness, I think it comes from my tia. You know, when I was growing up, my tia Chris just was always in the community. She was helping the school systems in Texas, over in Houston. She was in the community, and I just saw all the hours that she put into that in addition to her job. And so I think I just always wanted to embody that. That was just something that I knew I wanted to just always think about. How do I give back? How do I continue thinking about not just me, but who my community is and working with them? So I think that's where it comes from.
And did you attend an HSI?
I did attend an HSI. I actually attended as an undergraduate Cal State Fullerton. And then for my master's and my PhD, I attended UC Santa Barbara, which really taught me the difference between being at an HSI and not being at an HSI. So even though as an undergraduate, I was at Fullerton, and then Santa Barbara I was as a graduate student, there were just different, at the time, there were different resources that were available. The faculty looked different. The staff looked different. My peers looked different. We talked about different things in the classrooms. And then even when I went, because I started my career teaching at CSU Northridge, and that's also an HSI. And so I think just who was in my classroom was always different between Fullerton and Santa Barbara. So I knew I also had to work at an HSI. When I started at Sac State, it actually wasn't an HSI. We had the numbers, but we hadn't, I guess, declared ourselves or been recognized as an HSI quite yet. But that happened right after I got to Sac State. So we'll talk about that later. But
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So you had some servingness in practice, in experience, but now y'all are doing the theoretical conception of servingness, which we're going to get into, right? So we'll go ahead and pass the microphone to Jacky. Go ahead and tell us about your servingness journey.
Hi, so my name is Jacky, and I really think my servingness journey started from my parents. My parents are very giving to their community. They give in any way they can, even if they don't have money. They try and support their neighbors, their people from their church, just anyone, to the point that everyone in my town knew who my parents were, and they would, come up to me and be like, "Oh, how are you? How are your parents?" And I would be like, "Who are you?" But like, this is nice, you know me. But I really started to kind of figure out where my own servingness journey would start when I was reflecting with my sister, Veronica. I have 7 older siblings, by the way, so if I throw around sisters and brothers, just know there's 7 of them. But she was telling me how, despite our backgrounds, we've had many opportunities with education and opportunities for experiences to learn. And that's not something everyone in my background has. So I need to use that to my advantage to further serve my community and put myself in spaces that there is not a lot of people that look like me or have the same background as me. And so I've been, pushing that servingness by pursuing a Doctor of Physical Therapy degree. I will be starting in fall of 2024. I just received my acceptance a few days ago. So I'm happy to share that with everyone today. And
Woohoo!
thank you.
Woo!
Thank you. And I will be attending Sac State, which is a HSI. I attended there for my undergraduate degree as well. And I really think I became the most HSI conscious when I started this project with using our voices at Sac State. Thank you.
Thank you for that beautiful introduction. We'll go ahead and pass the mic to Sam.
Hello, my name is Sam or Samantha, and my servingness journey started honestly, when I got to college, but I was pretty active as an advocate during high school. But during high school, I never really had that support within my community. I was always deemed that as I'm neither here or there, which a lot of students, which I came to realize at Sac State, have the same story as I. But thankfully, I had a mom who was very supportive, who was very deemed machismo as non-existent. She never placed that upon me or my sister or my siblings. So I'm really glad to have such a strong-willed mother who really stood on her foot saying, you need to be proud about your Mexican heritage, because I know we are proud and nobody gets to tell you who you are and what your identity is. So I'm thankful for that. And I'm thankful to have siblings who were at higher educations. Like my sister attended UCLA, but I saw how her path was very difficult compared to mine since she was a DACA, a dreamer. So I saw that if I have this opportunity, I have this status, let me use it to my advantage. So thankfully, when I got to Sac State, one of my professors reached out to me saying, hey, there's a research team going on that I think you'll be really good at. They're focusing on serving is about Latinx, and I know you're very proud of that, and I feel like you'll be a great fit. So having this team, having this cohort like for the past 2 years has really broadened my consciousness of what an HSI is, because when I came to Sac State, I didn't know it was a HSI because I started during COVID, during lockdown. So during those 2 years, I was like isolated. So thankfully, I had this community. Thankfully, I'm starting to learn what HSI is, and I'm really proud to be in this team.
Wow, before I get into my servingness journey, my heart's just so full because although we know each other and we're on the same team, there's just things we don't hear about each other. And so it's so wonderful to get to know more about each other. I think similarly to Amber, it's my aunt that started my servingness journey, in that through acts of service and I think through church, I really first found service. And then it's been through educational institutions. I never attended an HSI, but I went to a lot of institutions that were service oriented or an anchor institution, or were thinking about universities' roles in their communities. And then my first job as a faculty member was at Sac State. And as we've heard, it's an HSI. And that was the first time I heard of Hispanic Serving Institution, was at Sac State and through Amber, who was in the same department as I was. And then I began to think a lot more critically, not only about universities' roles in their communities, but then intersecting that with what does it mean to be with Latina students and in Latina communities, and think much more deeply about that. And now I just recently transitioned to a PWI, or predominantly white institution, at University of Connecticut. And I'm feeling what it means to work at an HSI and working at a PWI, and that transition as well.
All right. Thank you all. I love that you talk about servingness in all these different ways. Like how you learn to come to serve comes in so many ways, like churches and communities and tias. Shout out to all the tias who taught us that. Yet the servingness we're talking about is connected specifically to serving Latinx students, right, at HSIs. So let's get into the project that y'all have been working on, which is called Using Our Voices to Transform HSIs, which has engaged 14 co-researchers across two cohorts, including Mariposas con Voces and Songs of the Hummingbird. Through a photo voice process and a campus-wide survey, y'all have defined Latinx student success and identified how institutional elements and the campus environment can better serve Latinx students. So let's talk about it. I think we're going to bring Kevin back in. You want to start and just tell us a little bit about the project's, like, its origin story plus evolution from idea to funding and implementation.
Yeah, thank you. There's a longer origin story, which we're not going to get totally into, but it really started, Amber and I, when I first got to Sac State in 2018, there was a big push around get out the vote with midterm elections. And Amber and I began collaborating with our student government and 6 student organizations around how do we think of, and the Cal Endowment, around how do we think about students getting out the vote on college campuses. And we really built it from the ground up with student organizations. And we heard from students like, oh, people don't bring us together like this. We've never really been brought to think about these things. And we realized in that project, which was recognized by the state attorney general for getting out the vote on college campuses for its innovation, as, wow, student voice is very, very powerful and is needed, and students are craving that in this larger structure. And so Amber and I continued to talk, and that's when Amber started teaching me what it meant, or what Sac State meant as an HSI, as a Hispanic serving institution, and how can we think about our university's role. And as we started looking into it, there wasn't as much on what do students perceive as servingness? What does it mean for an institution to serve them and their families and their communities? And we said, why don't we continue this work with students and build a project where students are taking the lead on what that looks like? And so we started applying for grants, we were unsuccessful, and then someone introduced us to the College Futures Foundation. And that's when we met April Yee, who was a former program officer at College Futures, and she was all about using student voice and student empowerment, and College Futures was very eager to support us in building this out. And then we jumped into it. We started recruiting students. It was still during COVID, so we were wondering if this is in person, online. And then as we began our first cohorts, began our first photo voice process, we then start beginning to talk to the institution to also ask for support. And this is where I'm going to turn it over to Amber to share a little bit about the institution beginning to support this process as well.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. So I think one thing we knew was that we wanted to hear student voices, but we also knew that students knew what policies, practices, elements on campus that they needed to, which ones needed to change. But we also knew that we weren't always in all of these spaces. So we needed to have an advisory board on campus that could hear from the students, listen to them, and then take those and implement change in the policies and practices that were in those own divisions. But we also knew that people weren't going to just add additional labor to their already very full plate. So our very first meeting was with our VP of Student Affairs, our Vice President of Student Affairs, Dr. Ed Mills. And he was so supportive of the project. He was like, who do you want? Let's brainstorm who we need to have. We know we need someone from the financial aid office, because many of our students were starting to have conversations around financial aid, but going to college is not their decision, it's their family's decision. And sometimes those families need to understand things in different terms, less jargon, and a different language. So we knew we needed somebody from that office, housing, mental health services. So we created this advisory board, and he was like, you also need to have the executive director of Student Success Initiatives, Jim Dragnam. And we were like, but that's such a, right, at that time, the focus of Sac State was very much on graduation rates. And we were like, we don't really want to focus just on graduation rates. He's like, no, we need to think about how these all work together. So we did, and Jim was also very, very supportive of the project. He came to all of our first couple of meetings. to sort of bring the project, start the project up. And as he started to listen to the students and their voices, he started to say, how can we integrate this qualitative, very rich qualitative data that you're gathering through these photos with our quantitative data and our institutional dashboards? And we were like, well, we can think more about that. And then one day he just told Kevin and I, well, I'll give you money to do that. Like, I will give you institutional support. We never had to write a real big proposal. He was just so supportive of our project. And Jim's not with us anymore. He passed. But I found out at his celebration of life that we were one of the last projects that he funded, and that it was just a very important project to him to see how students' voices need to be integrated into a lot of the decisions that we make at the higher institutional level around policies, practices. And that he really started to say, like, oh, students are just coming to college to get degrees. They're coming to college for so much more, for their racial and ethnic identity development, to develop their critical consciousness. And so we need to make sure that that rich data is also in the as we unpack these quantitative findings, that data is also there.
Okay, so a perfect combination of students willing to do this, some external funding, shout out to College Futures, and some internal support. It sounds like a lot of internal support, including more institutional funding, right, to really get this project going. Okay, I like it. I like learning and thinking about our listeners, right? Some people are listening and thinking, how can I do this, right? So just wanted to summarize some of the three key things I heard there. Before we jump into some of the findings, which I really want to hear, and we're going to bring our student voices in. Amber, if you could just real quick set the context for us. I think what we're missing is understanding Sac State's HSI. You mentioned when you arrived, it wasn't an HSI, and now you're in full force, it sounds like. So just tell us a little bit about where y'all are at when you became an HSI, and if you have grants besides y'all's.
No, yeah, absolutely. So Sac State reached its 25% undergraduate Latinx student enrollment in actually 2013. But like many, I think, institutions, we didn't have an HSI task force. We didn't have an HSI director at that time. And so there was nobody to submit the paperwork anywhere. So we actually didn't do that. That was actually Dr. Viviana Diaz, who is now at CSU San Marcos. She worked really hard to get that data, submit that paperwork, and we were recognized as an HSI in 2015, which is also when we got our first Developing Hispanic Serving Institutions grant by the U.S. Department of Ed. And that first grant, again, I've mentioned graduation rates. Sac State didn't have great graduation rates about 10 years ago. And so that first grant was really about how do we engage the entire campus, faculty, staff, administrators, into improving graduation rates. I will note that students they were the recipients of the outcomes that faculty, staff, and administrators put into the grants, but they weren't part of the discussion about what do we need to do. They weren't involved in that discussion. They were if we do this as faculty, then students will graduate. But we never asked students what we should be doing as faculty to get students to graduate. But that was our very first grant. Since then, we've been awarded 4 additional DHSI grants. And currently, Sac State has about a 37% undergraduate Latinx undergraduate student population, and 29% of our graduate student population actually identify as Latinx. So we have a very large undergraduate student population as well as graduate student population. And I will say that our graduation rates have increased tremendously. We're now at a 52.64% Latinx graduation rate, and our white students are at a 57.33%. So they have increased. And again, our focus has primarily been on graduation rates. But I think I mentioned this early. As we talk to Latinx students, as I was talking to Latinx students in my classroom, as I was thinking about my own experience as a student, it wasn't just about graduating. It was about what comes after that. Like I was I started to develop my aspirations to go to graduate school when I was an undergraduate. And I didn't know about graduate school until my senior year. Maybe it was like right before my senior year, and a faculty member tapped me on the shoulder. But we don't talk about those things. And so it's not just about graduation. So that's where we really wanted to unpack, what else is it? What else do students come to campus for? And how is the campus serving them in all of these other outcomes or things they want to get out of this? Which is sort of where the project went.
Okay. It's like me and you are same aligned. You know that I'm all about HSI being much more than graduation rates. But for you to be able to say, but our graduation rates have improved significantly over the past 10 years, that's also phenomenal, right? Like, yes, we want to say that. And I always have to, it's almost like I have to say that when I'm saying, yes, graduation rates are absolutely important. There's just so much more. Yes. To this servingness. So thank you for putting an exclamation point on that. So let's talk a little bit more then about the project and the moving beyond the focus of graduation rates, although it sounds like y'all have kept it intertwined with the project, right? And particularly with your campus advisory board, keeping that sort of at the forefront, something they're interested in. So let's talk to Jacky. What are some of the major findings y'all have found from the project thus far?
Yeah, so from the two cohorts, Mariposas con Voces and Songs of the Hummingbird, we came to a total of 18 themes on how Sac State as an HSI is currently serving their students. And these 18 themes came from hours of research, discussion, and work. And of the 18 themes, we found that the most important ones to share with the university were imposter phenomenon, great intentions need attention, how they perceive us and what are their assumptions. We are more than just students. Representation of the Latin culture is needed in the classroom. And ese vive en las nubes, they live in the clouds. And these were some really important themes for us to share with the university, because we felt that it would allow the institution as a whole to better serve their students and focus on more serving rather than solely graduation. We want to specifically highlight two of the themes from our 18 total themes, such as hustle culture. And hustle culture is from the Songs of the Hummingbird cohort. And from this cohort, we felt that as students, our full identity was not being embraced. We were just being seen as students solely, an undergraduate student with this degree, but there was so much more going on behind that front identity. We have jobs, we have families, we have children, we have so many other things to take care of, and we kept on packing it onto us. Like, we felt like it was our duty to do so, because if not, nothing was going to get done. So we had to overload ourselves, and it sometimes led to burnout and, kind of deterring us away from our goals or aspirations. What really kind of Sac State has a problem with hustle culture at times is that with their graduation initiative, Finish in 4, or for transfer students through and 2, it kind of enforces hustle culture onto students, because if you don't graduate the year that you claimed, you would get penalized financially. So if I said, I'm applied for graduation 2024 spring, and something happened and I had to change my graduation date, I now get penalized. And it not only hurts us financially, it hurts us mentally, because of course we all had this goal to graduate, and now there's things going on. We can't do it, and there's not really any support for it. And it's kind of hard to appreciate all of our efforts that we had been, pursuing when we get setbacks like this. Along with our findings, we did a survey which was open to the whole university. We opened it in spring of 2023. And with our survey findings, we found that our themes were supported and were seen with many students throughout the university. We asked questions such as, I feel overwhelmed, and the phrase finish in 4 and through and 2 are overwhelming for me. And many of the students strongly agreed. There was a few that were, strongly disagree. They neither agreed or disagreed, but on a majority, they felt overwhelmed. They felt like there was too much going on. And that goes to show that this is a way that the university can intervention and support their students. In the second theme, great intentions need attention. This is a theme from Mariposas con Voces, and we found that, you know, Sac State is doing a really good job. There is like centers such as the cultural center that can help and support students, but it needs improvement. In our first exhibition, we shared a photo of the cultural center and how it was very underwhelming. It was hard to find. There wasn't much signage. It was kind of dark and gloomy and, not very inviting compared to right next door was a coffee shop called the Grumpy Mule. Signs everywhere, very alluring, drawing more students in compared to the cultural center, which is a free resource and it's inviting. Well, it's supposed to be inviting. From that exhibition, we did hear from campus representatives, we're going to make a change, we're going to make a change, we're going to put signage, we're going to, make it more inviting. And they have been making the steps to do that. So we appreciate that of them. But now we need to focus our attentions to other areas of the campus. The cultural center was just one example, but there still isn't a Hispanic serving, Latinx cultural center for students. There is, other centers like the Cerna Center, which is a very amazing resource, but also needs signage because it's hard for students to find it. And if they're already feeling lost and scared, and not really wanting to reach out, they're going to want to go to a safer space like their car or the library compared to a resource that they might not even know exists. But those were some of the themes that we found in our research.
Wow, a whole bunch to unpack for anybody listening. There's so much to think through. So thank you, Jacky, for giving us just those two. I have all kinds of ideas. So Amber, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to just add a little bit about the Serna Center because for our Sac State community, they're going to be like, that is the Latinx student center space. But I think where it's located is very hidden. So we have a building called Lassen Hall, and that is where a lot of our student facing centers are. So the Martin Luther King Center that is there. We have a Pita Desi Center that is also located in this Lassen Hall. And it's not until you cross over a quad and you have to go down like a dark hallway and first you have to find the door that leads you to the dark hallway that then takes you to the Serna Center that is in the same space as the DRC, our Dreamer Resource Center, and camp. So they all three share a space. And I think what's challenging is because the DRC shares a space with the Serna Center, I think students immediately think, oh, they must think all Latino students are undocumented. And for our students who are also, who identify as Hmong, who might also be undocumented, they don't think that DRC is then the space for them. So I think seeing a separation of that. We also had, Dr. Eric Ramirez, who's our director of affinity centers on our campus. He sat on our advisory board, or he sits on our advisory board. And he also was sort of like, well, we need to now also think about the types of programming that we're doing for our students. So last year, they really started to curate and lead the curation of having activities that are student facing for Hispanic Heritage Month. Because I think a lot of their events were, you had to sort of look for them. They weren't university wide. And so I think making sure that students are seeing those things. Because we do have a space. It's just very, very hidden. There is no signage, as Jacky said. And then it also shares a space with these two other centers. And I think people are like, well, if I don't have that identity, then I can't go. Right. So I think thinking about where we place our centers on campuses is super, super important. And how we share spaces, because I recognize spaces a hot commodity, but how we share spaces, how we decide which centers share spaces with which centers, I think that says something. It gives the students an indication. They make assumptions about things that we may not have even been assuming, but we need to listen to those.
But I think that's what I love the name of this theme that they came up with. It's like great intentions needs attention. And I think that speaks volumes about a lot of things that we found going on. There's work being done and good work being done, but more needs to be done. So we found in Sac State, less than half of the Latinx students who filled out our survey knew we were an HSI. A lot of students said Sac State's prioritizing things like their mental health. They do see themselves in many course readings and course material, but at the same time, 1 in 5 said that they don't feel welcome or they feel isolated and they're considering leaving Sac State, right? So we've got things and we need to do better. And I just, that great attention needs attention always sticks with me about some of the ways that students are telling us the work needs to happen on campus.
I agree. I think it's such HSI. It's like, it's so like many HSIs probably would find the same thing if they did similar sort of process, right? Of like, there's many, I mean, I visit lots of HSIs. There's many good things going on. But is it sufficient? Is it enough? Does it need more attention? Does it create this interesting conversation about location and shared space and all that sort of stuff? And it does, absolutely. So I agree. I think it's a great theme, right, that y'all have highlighted. By the way, I want to note for our listeners that the website is in the show notes, so people can see more about the project there as we're talking. If you want to learn more about some of these themes, feel free to click on it. In thinking about a PAR process, y'all have done a lot of different things. Y'all did a photo voice project, right? Photos, then went to, obviously you did a lot of analysis there, Jacky said, and eventually did a survey. Part of that project process of doing participatory action research is then sharing. Once you collect a lot of data, then you share it back out, right, with the campus community or the people who are most affected by it. So Sam, you want to talk to us about some of that? How have y'all been sharing some of the things y'all are doing so that people with the power on campus will start to pay attention and give it some time and energy that needs?
Of course, thank you for that. First off, as you mentioned, Gina, before, you said that we had a website, and that website didn't come until a year into the project when both Songs of the Hummingbird and Mariposa con Voces came together. But before that, we did semester photo exhibits and presentation within the community. So when we broke off into cohorts that were separate at first, they did their findings, we did their findings right after when we developed. So that was one way that we were able to voice our findings towards the campus community, but at the same time, during our meetings, during our photo voice lessons, and what we had to like encounter for ourselves, we also came to the campus advisors that we had onto this project that Amber mentioned earlier, that we wanted them to come into our meetings to see how we are working, how these findings are impacting the students, and what it really defines for us, and what we think the advisors would really benefit from, since we're trying to outreach them, because in order for them to learn and understand what we are saying, they have to come and take those findings for themselves to see, I didn't really think this policy or practice would really affect these students, but at the end of the day, they're not students. We're in that position and we're able to voice our opinions by that. So we are grateful that the campus advisors were going to our meetings whenever they can. So, for example, like the Cerna Center, like we focused on earlier with Jacky and Amber, we really wanted the center to focus on serving that Latina student population on campus. And through that, we've combined the cohorts together later on when they were both developed. And we were saying, let's see, since we both have such similar themes that overrun each other and are so similar, why not do a culminating event? So we were building up to it. And during that culminating event, we said, let's do a survey. Let's reach out to the students. Because even though our voices are so important and are being heard, there's a ton of other Latina students that don't get a chance to. So we really wanted to reach out to them by doing a survey. And why not a better idea by using social media? Everyone's on TikTok, everyone's on Instagram. So that's the way we really connected with them. We were trying to do different TikTok trends, different we did a giveaway as well to kind of take the advantage that if we are in this society where social media is so grand, and that's where a lot of people make their connections. Why not use it to our advantage? And that really helped us because we had a lot of feedback. We had a lot of people reaching out to us, along with the semester photos exhibits saying, I saw on Instagram, I saw the flyers, like I really wanted to check it out. And they really wanted to know more about what this project was. They said, when's your next exhibit? When is it coming? This and that. And I said, wait for that. We will be coming. Do not worry. Like, hold, pause on that. But ever since then, we also directed saying we're going to have a website coming on where our findings are going to be there, our presentations, our contact info. So we really wanted to have a place where they could kind of go back and say, my voices are being heard. So we were able to do so many different things. And at the end, for the culminating event, our sharing findings within the campus community was so wide because we had friends and family come, we had faculty come, higher ups, professors. So at the end of the day, the culminating event was so vast and grand that I think we really connected with a lot of people, along with you who attended that culminating event, which we love and thank you for. So it was a really huge impact. But we continue to try to find different ideas on how to share the findings with campus community. Because at the end of the day, the research and the information is going to be developing over the years.
That's great. Thank you for all the different dimensions of it, and the ways that you communicated to campus, but also communicated to students, right? By ways that they might access it through like social media and TikTok trends and whatnot. So, y'all are doing so much. And yes, I did attend the culminating event, a beautiful event. Thank you for the invitation, and for really just allowing me to be a part of this journey with y'all, even just a little bit, in an advisory mode and by attending some of the events. So Amber, you want to tell us any other major accomplishments that y'all have achieved beyond some of these things that Jacky and Sam mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's important to note that Sac State's going through, I think, a transition that many campuses are going through, right? President Nelson, our president for 8 years, he retired after, I think, 9 years being on campus. So now he's, what is it? I think they say President Emeritus. Is that what they say? I don't even know. President Emeritus. That sounds good. And we welcomed a new president, President Luke Wood, onto campus. So we're really excited about that. But because of the transition, our culminating event actually happened with President Nelson and a lot of those cabinet members. When President Wood came on, we have a new Vice President of Student Affairs, Dr. Nisha Mitchell. We have a new president. So we have new people that are in those powerful administrative positions that don't know a lot about our project. But we also had already, which was great, was we had already sort of seen and set the ground for some of our major transformational changes at Sac State. And President Wood has embraced those. He may not know where they came from, is oftentimes what I'm seeing is like, oh yeah, we helped you there, which our first one was we had somebody from the Division of Inclusive Excellence on our advisory board who worked with our hiring of faculty and how to diversify that, because our students were saying, hey, we see a lot of faculty of color and they're all in ethnic studies, right? So how do we diversify the faculty across campus? And so there was a lot of discussion around how do we do that, matching faculty representation with student representation. We have done a lot of work on understanding the value as well as some of the challenges with cluster hires, right? And so thinking about that, but Sac State's going to be engaging in cluster hiring in the next couple of years. We created a lot more mechanisms for mental health services to hear directly from students regarding what is needed. So they created a lot of student-led mental health services, so student-led conversations about the Latinx student experience at Sac State. They created those. We've increased faculty learning communities to bring awareness and share strengths and strategies about how to integrate technology into their classroom experience and how to make that more accessible. We now have there is a faculty learning community about what does it mean to teach at an HSI. That's a new faculty learning community this year. There's also this creation of student-led campus tours that go beyond focusing on the structure of campus, where this building is versus where that building is, and more about the student experience on campus. And our students really said, but those need to be student led. We need to have student voice in those. So those are coming. There was a push to create an institution campus-wide HSI task force. President Wood was like, that's great, but we need an HSI director to lead that task force. And so that's coming. We also are redesigning our Sac State HSI website because when I was presenting to cabinet, so I should also back up a little bit. Because of who was on our advisory board, so Sac State received the Seal of Excelencia in 2020, and we were up for recertification in 2023, around the same time that we were doing that culminating event. So some of the people that were going to be tasked with completing that recertification application came to our culminating event. And they heard from our students, and they heard from Kevin and I, and they heard from you, Dr. Garcia, and Dr. Marcela Cuellar. We all are senior advisors to our project. And y'all came and presented about how this project really situates itself within the servingness journey, I guess, within the literature that's happening. And so they heard that, and then they asked me if I wanted to sit on the Seal of Excelencia recertification application, which I kind of giggled about because I was like, do y'all really want me to sit on that? But sure, let's go ahead and do it. And what happened though was that we were able to think about, what do we need to do? What have we done, and what do we need to do more of? And we were able to put that into that application and create those more opportunities for our students. But one thing that happened in that was they kept saying, like, we're embracing the other people, not the people on the application because they know me, but a lot of our administrators were like, we embrace our HSI identity. So when I was presenting at cabinet, I said, can you please look at the website and tell me where it says that we're an HSI? And I will never forget, they all had computers in front of them. And I was like, I will pause. I went into my teacher moment, and I was like, I will pause. I will give 3 minutes. Please find the place on our website that says we are an HSI. And nobody could find anywhere. We had an HSI website, and it said, as a minority serving institution. So not even on our website does it say as a Hispanic serving institution. And I remember right after that meeting, about 5 minutes, I got a text message from one of the cabinet members that said, in about 20 minutes, please open our homepage. You will see that it now says, as a very proud Hispanic serving institution and Anapeasy. So now on our website, it says that. So it was that type of thing that we need. We said, we are an HSI, but it's not visible anywhere to our campus community. And for some people like myself, I was looking to work at an HSI. And even in our vacancy announcements, just 3 or 4 months ago, it didn't even have it in our vacancy announcement. So looking for positions, if you're looking for positions and you want to be at an HSI, and where it says like about the institution, it didn't even claim that Sac State was an HSI. Now that has since changed, but that was because of our student voices. Those are some of the big impacts that we're making. And so we're sort of like, we have to be proud to be an HSI. We're working on it, which is good, right? Like Kevin said, great intentions needs attention, but we first need to say, we need to claim it. We need to claim it loud. And so I think that's what we're starting to work on, is making sure it's more visible. So you'll see a new HSI website coming out in the next couple of, I'm going to say weeks, because my goal is to have it done by end of February. But we're really excited. And then we were integrated. A lot of our findings were integrated into that Seal of Excelencia recertification application. So that was also really great, that we felt like we were really heard, and that we got that seal. We were successful in getting that recertification.
This is all ginormous. This isn't like small things. Y'all are going big or go home, right? Like these are all major, major wins. So I want to acknowledge that. And also just acknowledge the power of our student voices to push for this stuff. And I tell students all the time, speak up. Administrators don't like students who are upset, right? Like speak up, tell them voice. And what y'all did was give students a very strategic way to speak up, right? And because we're universities and we do what universities do, research is valid, right? Y'all packaged it in a research, right? You collected data and you presented it, and whew, I just want to say that this is all ginormous. So thank you for sharing all that. Kevin, do you want to give us a quick, before we turn back and hear from our students again, what's next for the project? Sounds like y'all have done a lot, but you have more on your plate coming up?
Yes. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
thank you. We have a lot coming up. I think one big thing that we heard and we've seen what this project is, we've been sharing a lot with our community. Sam told you all the things that we've been doing at Sac State. And now the question is, how do we get that out there for others to learn and for other scholars, other families, other students, other administrators to hear? And so a next phase is really dissemination. It's really like, how do we get this word out about what we're learning and be in conversations with folks like yourself and others about what this means for other HSIs and even our own, so we can learn from other HSIs. And so we're going to be doing a lot of work in getting this out there. So we have the website, but we're going to be doing some short research briefs, some practice briefs around like, what does it mean to collaborate among faculty and students, to collaborate with an advisory board, to think about policy and practice when we're using things like student-led research. So that's really coming up, really. And then we're really thinking about the CSU system. 21 out of the 23 CSUs are HSIs. What does that mean? What is the narrative at the CSU level about being an HSI or having so many HSIs in a state with so many Latina youth that are striving for going to higher ed and thinking about the skills they can cultivate and bring back into their communities? And so we want to start this conversation from the ground up, talking to other HSIs. And so we're going to bring students, faculty, and an administrator from a key select group of those CSU HSIs to have conversations, to share our findings, but also to hear from them about what's going on in their campus and to begin to think about what are some of the things that we're all doing that we can highlight, and then also ask the system to say, what's your narrative about being an HSI? I don't know if you go to CSU's website, do they have it just like Sac State now does, of like, we are proud of this identity? And so that's the next work, is bringing together our sister campuses and saying, this is what we're learning. What are you learning, including those student voices in that? And then bringing that to the chancellor's office and saying, let's look at it as a system.
Powerful. This is action research. This is institutional change. Y'all are institutional agents. Like, y'all are the movement, right? I talk about the HSI movement. Y'all are defining what a movement looks like on a campus. And the movement, as I say, starts small, right? It starts small. It starts with a small group of dedicated people, and it picks up momentum. So thank you all. But yes, still more work to do. I understand that. But at the same time, just really want to, acknowledge a lot of the things that y'all are saying it's just beautiful. I love these conversations. That's why I have this podcast, right? So we can hear and we can learn from each other. We can't write this stuff down fast enough, but we can listen to it in an hour episode of like what's going on. So as y'all know, I talk about freedom dreaming in the book, and I talk about a new future for HSIs and a time when everybody knows HSIs, and HSIs is really in our narrative. It's in our social consciousness that people know what HSI is. So what are your hopes and dreams for HSIs as you think about what you've learned from this project and what you dream and hope for HSIs? So we're gonna hear from Sam.
Thank you for that. I know you mentioned it always starts with a small group of people. It's a big dream. And I feel like if we continue to dream big, then at least in the future, it'll manifest. Like, our thoughts and our words will manifest into the future, into reality. So a lot of people do not know what an HSI is. Like, I know my family did not know what it is. I know my friends, my professors didn't really know what it is until we started pushing for it. So within that hopes and dreams, I hope that we can really destigmatize the various notions within our culture that we bring onto our academic life and journey and careers. Such like, some can say it's a culture trauma. such as the two topics that we discussed within our research. One is the hustle culture, and the other is the lack of sympathy and support on mental health. So I feel like if we really focus on how to make HSI bigger and how to make HSI more important and hear those student voices, I feel like we have to start to see Latinx students more than just numbers, more than just poster people for their photo shoots to just plaster on their website or on their colleges. Like instead of just saying, oh, well, see our diversity, see our voices. But in reality, when we see within our research and we see various stories and voices, we hear the lack of academic support, the lack of faculty support, and a lot of students, especially those who identify as Latinx, not having that space, going unhidden, going unvoiced. So as we move on forward, I really hope that Latinx students are more seen as voices, such as other people are, because we bring so much to the table, and with support, we can go so far. Because at the end of the day, we are stronger together than apart. So I really hope that HSIs can grow so vast with the support from faculty and seeing how this definition can redefine us as one.
Thank you for that hope and dream about HSIs. Another question I wanted to ask y'all is just for the people listening from a student perspective, what would be a couple things you would want to offer as recommendations as we start to think about we're wrapping up this episode? What would be some final recommendations for people listening? So Jacky, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so I think some final recommendations I would like to share is that, you know, HSIs such as Sac State have a lot of student presence. I always see, clubs, organizations, students themselves pushing and making that connection for other Latina students. But once again, it's on the student level, and I think that needs to be institutionalized so that, once these students graduate, what if they don't pass it down to someone else? Who's going to carry on that legacy, that, sense of community that this original group of students built? Who's going to carry that on if it's not supported by the university? So I think as each university highlights well, our students are doing this, our students are doing that, they're so amazing. Think about the ways that you can further support these organizations, student organizations specifically, and create purpose, like create a intention and purpose for them to continue on their legacy even as they graduate. I know there is, alumni. Sac State has a very strong alumni association, and that's one of the ways that they get connected. We have very strong clubs and student government. That's one of the ways, and that is institutionalized, so it makes it easier to carry on as students graduate and move on to their different paths in life, because they won't forever be an undergraduate student. They will move on and make the next steps in their lives, and that might mean, leaving behind, what they had. So I think that's something I would like to share, to kind of keep in mind that while students are putting in the work, the institution needs to help them to set it into a concrete format in the institution.
Can I add something to that? I think one thing that the institution did, so we have a graduation, the Chicano Latino graduation ceremony, CLRC, graduation recognition ceremony, I think it is, where if you're graduating, you get to participate. About 3 years ago, there was a fee to participate in this. Students had to pay their own money, an additional fee to pay to participate. And they only could bring, I think it was two people to this event, and they had to pay. And I just remember when I found out that the students were paying, and it was also student organized. If the students were not at the table to organize this large event, then it really didn't happen. Or to that level. I mean, there was a little bit of support, but it was also centered again within this Sedna Center. And it wasn't until about 2 years ago that it is now a budget line item at the institutional level. The institution now pays for it. They now have a team of faculty, staff, and students that are the planning team for this event. So it's still, students are still involved in it, but the doing of it to celebrate them for graduating is now on us, the institution, and we're also now paying for it. We're no longer asking for you to pay to attend a ceremony in which we want to recognize you to your families and to your communities. So I think that's another way that, you know, we want to make sure that the institution takes ownership over this, and it doesn't rest on the students and the faculty and the staff.
Thank you for that addition. I think with all three of those answers, there was a theme of like, this has to live on. Like, this is not going to end with us, right? And particularly when we bring students into a project, students come and go, right? But like, how does it live on beyond y'all, so that it can be your legacy, right? That y'all can come back and say like, we were a part of that. Although we know once stuff gets institutionalized, we do start sometimes to forget the history. You mentioned that's already starting to happen, right? That like, y'all have done all this legwork and now it's just part of what we do. Right. So President Wood can say, oh, we do this without having to really acknowledge even all the steps that it took to even get there. That's institutionalization. Right. And so I think there's some pros and cons to that because we want to make sure the history lives on. So I'm glad y'all are embedding some of your work into the website. Right. That's coming on board. But we need to honor it, right? So that's going to be a whole nother grant. Y'all are going to get in 20 years. You're going to do a big alumni, bring back the whole project and talk about the legacy. Hopefully. I'm just putting that out there. All right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode with the final question. Everybody's got to answer the final question of the podcast, which is, ¿Qué pasa HSIs? So Kevin, tell us, ¿Qué pasa HSIs?
I think ¿Qué pasa HSIs is we need to stop being afraid of investing in our students and in our soul. The thing that I'm hoping people hear from this is the heart that's in the project. HSIs means embracing heart and feeling and liberation and dreaming. And that's what needs to happen. We need to let go of certain things and dream along with our students. And that's how we're going to get to the next place.
Thank you. Sam, you want to jump in? ¿Qué pasa HSIs?
Of course, ¿Qué pasa HSI? We got to do less talking and more walking. HSIs are gonna say we are investing, we are doing this, but at the end of the day, it's just all talk. It's just all word. We need to see action because at this point, it seems like there's momentum going, but it's not enough momentum. So there needs to be less talk and more walk. There has to be more doing.
Yes, I love it. Jacky, ¿Qué pasa HSIs?
Yeah, so for ¿Qué pasa HSIs, I just want to remind everyone that just because we have, pretty good thing going, there's always room for improvement. If you think, this is perfect, it's not. It's only perfect if you're always growing. So keep that in mind, that growth mindset, to always improve, always think of the students in mind. Thank you.
Amber, go ahead.
All right. ¿Qué pasa HSIs? I think I sit on a lot of committees across campus. And I think one of the things I keep seeing is a lot of faculty, staff, administrators, and we have all the answers. And I keep saying, we don't have the answers. We really need to go talk to our students. And so I think when you're making decisions, when you're making policies, you're deciding to change a policy, you're deciding to have a different activity or an event on campus, I think you need to look around the room and ask yourself, do we have any students in this space? And then when you say no, I think before you implement that policy, before you implement that practice, before you implement that change, you need to go to your students and check to see how they're feeling about it. It doesn't have to be a big survey. It doesn't have to be, it could just be a couple of students you call in and ask. But we have those students on campus that are ready and they're ready. They have the answers for us. So we got to be asking them.
And that's what's up. Thanks, y'all, for being with us today on ¿Qué pasa HSIs?